Analysis of I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King. As usual, I'm Manusha Tennakon. Don't forget to subscribe my YouTube channel for more educational videos like this. Content of today's presentation. Number 1, Martin Luther King biography. Number 2, significance of the speech. Number 3, synopsis of the speech. Number 4, significant themes of the speech. Martin Luther King biography. Martin Luther King Jr. was an American Baptist minister and activist who became the most visible spokesman and leader in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. King was born on 15 January 1929 and he was assassinated on 4th April 1968. Martin Luther King got lots of influences from great personalities like Mahatma Gandhi, Abraham Lincoln. King won the Nobel Prize for Peace in 1964. Martin Luther King wanted to bring equality to American society and make the United States a pleasant place for all nations. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech is one of the American history's most celebrated oratory pieces. King delivered the speech from the steps of Lincoln Memorial in Washington on August 28, 1963, as the final speech of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Following the speech, King was named Time Magazine's 1963 Man of the Year.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, the great American, in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the monocles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his homeland. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition.
First, King expresses his happiness in joining the audience in a demonstration of freedom in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Then he goes back to American history and reminds the gathering of the Emancipation Proclamation signed by President Abraham Lincoln. This proclamation declared that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are and henceforth shall be free. It gave tremendous joy to millions of Negro slaves in America. Next, King says that even 100 years later, the signing of the proclamation, black people are still not truly free as they lack the same material benefits afforded other Americans. The march is designed to draw attention to that fact.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note, insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked, insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so, we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
The marches are there to redeem a promise, to cash a check written to black people by the US government and the founding fathers who promised all men were created equal in both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. All men includes African Americans. Yet, America failed to deliver on its promise. King, in his speech, compares this false promise to a check that cannot be cashed by black people. King is optimistic because he thoroughly believes that they can get their black check redeemed because King does not believe that Bank of Justice is bankrupt. His ultimate goal is to cash this check, which will give them the riches of freedom and security of justice.
We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. And those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. And there will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges.
The marches are also there to remind the nation that the present is the time to act. Americans should not fall for the trap of making slow and steady progress. Instead, America must today fulfill the full promise of democracy and racial justice. The summer has been one of discontent, but 1963 is a beginning, not an end. The road ahead will lead to an autumn marked with equality for all people so long as the summer's protests do not result in a return to the compliancy of years past.
There is something that I must say to my people, who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people, for many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back.
King interrupts to warn the audience that the road to freedom must not be led by bitterness, hatred, or bad behavior, especially violence. Instead, those seeking freedom must hold themselves to a higher moral standard and meet acts of violence with acts of love and faith. It is a good thing that black people are now militant about their freedoms, but they must recognize that there are white people in the crowd who have joined the march and who see their struggle for freedom linked to that of black Americans. Black people must walk with white people, as no one can march alone.
There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating, "For whites only." We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, no, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream.
As they march, all must promise to continue marching forward. Many will ask if the marchers will ever be satisfied. The answer is no. They will not be satisfied as long as black men are victims of police violence. Segregation endures. Black people have no upward economic mobility and are disfranchised. The marchers will not be satisfied until justice and righteousness flow through the nation.
I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. And some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana, go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed.
King turns from the general group to individual groups. Some present have come from worse struggles than others, some from jails, some from areas in which they have suffered police violence and persecution. But to each of them, King asked them to continue to creatively suffer, but to ensure the suffering begets change. He asked them to take that faith back to their homestays.
Let us not wallow in the valley of despair, I say to you today, my friends. And so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
He returns to the group as a whole, announcing he still has a dream about the nation. His dream is that America will finally live up to the words of the founders, that all men are created equal. He also dreams white people and black people will be able to sit down together as equals, and Mississippi will be turned from a hotbed of injustice to a land of freedom. He dreams that in the future people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by who they are as individuals, and that Alabama will be a place where white and black children can join hands together. With this dream, King will return to the South, and with this dream and this faith, everyone present can transform the nation into one of brotherhood, as long as everyone works together.
This is our hope, and this is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. And this will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring.
One day, American children will be able to sing America with new meaning, for its lyrics will actually reflect the truth.
And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that. Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
As a prerequisite for America to become a great nation, freedom must ring across all the majestic landscape of the United States, from New Hampshire to California to Colorado to Tennessee and everywhere in between. And when that happens, all of God's children of all races and faith will be able to sing the old African American spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Themes of the speech. The world-famous speech, I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King, consists of many important themes. Among them, let's pay our attention to the following three themes. Theme number 1, freedom for Black Americans. King emphasizes the fact that the United States owes its black citizens their freedom, described by the founding fathers as an unalienable right. Despite Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation and the promissory note of the Declaration of Independence, Black Americans are still denied freedom and equality through segregation and discrimination. King describes in vivid detail what true freedom would mean. In a truly free United States, Black people would be able to stay in any hotel they wanted, vote in every state, and be offered social mobility beyond simply exchanging one ghetto for another. King expresses his hope for the US and believes that the Bank of Justice is not bankrupt. It is King's hope that one day the United States will truly let freedom ring by granting it to those who have been denied it. Theme number 2, peaceful protest. A significant portion of King's speech is devoted to urging his supporters to not turn from their creative protest to violence or aggression, though they face physical violence from their opposition. He specifically refers to police brutality as one of the evils still afflicting the black man in the United States. He asked his supporters to trust that maintaining their dignity and protesting peacefully is the best way to fight for equality and justice. In the civil rights struggle, they must meet physical force with soul force and respond peacefully to their oppressors until equality is achieved. Theme number 3, hope for the future. King's speech became famous for his repetition of the phrase, "I have a dream," an expression of his optimism for the United States' future. He describes the country he dreams of and believes will arrive one day, a country where the promises of the Declaration of Independence will apply to all citizens and where his children will be judged by their character and not their skin color. King states that in the struggle for equal rights, it is hope that will give African Americans the strength to fight, sustain them during setbacks, and drive them to keep striving for the changes they hope to see. He declares that the United States must let freedom ring from every state and from various mountains across the US, such as Stone Mountain of Georgia and Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. When freedom rings from every mountainside, America will be truly beautiful. Dear students, we have come to the end of today's presentation, and I hope you got a sound knowledge about the speech "I Have a Dream" by Martin Luther King. Hope to see you soon with another educational video like this. For that, please subscribe my YouTube channel.